The story begins with a group of men carrying out a drug deal inside an abandoned building, but this is actually part of a police operation meant to capture a major drug boss who has been on the local authorities' most wanted list for a long time. One of the officers involved is Danny, an experienced police intelligence agent who is working undercover as the buyer. He stays calm, relaxed, and completely convincing in his role. Everything is going according to plan at first, but the moment the dealer tells Danny to sample the drugs, the officers listening in decide they cannot wait any longer. They immediately order the surrounding police units to move in, and the scene explodes into a violent raid filled with gunfire.
Police, freeze! You're all under arrest!
Right in the middle of the chaos, while the rest of the team is busy chasing down the last dealer trying to escape, Danny goes after the drug boss himself. The two of them end up in a brutal fight, and at one point, Danny actually manages to grab the boss just as he is about to fall from a high ledge. For a second, it looks like he might save him, but then his grip slips and the boss plunges to his death. Since Danny fails to bring the target in alive, the police chief is clearly furious that the man they had been hunting for so long dies just like that. After spending such a long time undercover to infiltrate the group, Danny is finally able to return home and be himself again. That night, he tries to make up for lost time with his girlfriend, but things do not go well. She is frustrated with his work, with how rarely he comes home, and with how little time he gives her. The next morning, Danny finds a letter from her ending their relationship. It hits him hard. Not long after that, he hears someone entering his house. To his shock, it is the police, led by the chief himself, raiding Danny's home over accusations that he is hiding drugs. After searching the place, they find 2 packages hidden under his bed. Danny is stunned. He cannot believe what he is seeing and immediately realizes he has been set up. And in that moment, his life is completely turned upside down. This is Lockdown. Danny's arrest shocks the very criminals and inmates he once helped put behind bars. None of them can believe that someone as smart and accomplished as Danny could end up in this situation. But Danny knows he is the victim of a conspiracy, and with no way to prove it yet, he has no choice but to go along with the process. Because the charges against him are so serious, Danny is sent to Blackwater prison, a remote facility far from any residential area, built specifically to hold high-level criminals. Once he arrives there, he is treated exactly like every other inmate. Being a former cop earns him no special treatment at all. Inside his cell, Danny is placed with an older prisoner named Irving, a man who has already spent years behind bars. Irving is a former kung fu trainer, but he has no friends in the prison because he keeps to himself and stays distant from everyone around him. Not long after settling into his cell, a guard named Kirkman shows up. He is known as the right-hand man of the prison warden and wastes no time pulling Danny out to meet the man in charge. That man is Burke, the head of Blackwater prison, someone known for being strict and unforgiving with inmates who cause trouble. He calls Danny in to make one thing clear: stay in line and do not create problems, especially with a dangerous inmate named Fargus, who just happens to be Danny's old enemy from before prison. After that meeting, things take a dark turn. It is meant to be a harsh welcome, a reminder of what life in Blackwater is really like. The next morning during breakfast, Danny is still covered in bruises and struggling to even find a place to sit. Eventually, he notices Irving sitting alone and decides to join him. While they eat, Danny spots Fargus and asks Irving about him. Irving explains that Fargus is not just another inmate. He is the one running illegal death matches inside the prison, where inmates fight each other for money and the promise of freedom. He is able to do all of this because he controls Burke and has powerful connections even outside the prison, enough to threaten the families of high-ranking officials. In the middle of their conversation, a prisoner suddenly starts trouble by knocking over Irving's food on purpose. Danny does not hold back and immediately beats the man down. After that fight, word spreads quickly. Danny gains a reputation as a former police intel who can fight. The man he defeated turns out to be part of a gang led by Rollins, a group that now sees Danny as a problem and warns him not to interfere with them again. Later, back in his cell, Danny receives an unexpected visit from a special agent named Gwen. She is still investigating his case and tells him that there is hope. His case is not closed, and there is still a chance he can get out of prison. Elsewhere, Fargus is calmly playing chess when Rollins and his crew approach him, demanding their share of the betting profits. Fargus refuses without hesitation. Even though Rollins has more men, He cannot do anything about it. Fargus controls everything inside Blackwater, including Kirkman, who follows his orders without question. The next day, Danny joins Irving to work in the prison laundry. He does his best to keep his head down and work properly. But trouble finds him again. Several inmates who hold grudges from the past attack him out of nowhere. Danny fights back and takes them all down. Afterward, he worries that the guards might find out about the fight, but Irving reassures him. The attackers had already covered the CCTV cameras beforehand, making sure no one would see what happened. Later that afternoon, Fargus has Kirkman bring Danny to his office. He wants Danny to take part in the underground fights he runs inside the prison. These matches draw huge attention from the inmates with heavy betting involved, and Danny quickly becomes a valuable attraction. At first, Danny refuses to give a clear answer and leans toward rejecting the offer. Fargus does not take that lightly. Instead, he orders his men to make sure Danny changes his mind. Not long after, while Danny is in the shower, he is suddenly attacked by another inmate sent by Fargus.
Got a message from Vargas.
The assault is brutal, leaving Danny badly injured and forcing him into the prison hospital for several days. When he finally regains consciousness, the doctor treating him makes it clear that he is lucky to still be alive. The message is simple. Surviving in this prison means doing what Fargus wants. It is not about winning, it is about staying alive. Realizing he has no other choice, Danny agrees to join the fights. Once Fargus gets confirmation, the news spreads quickly throughout the prison. Messages are passed from inmate to inmate, building anticipation. The fights open the door for massive gambling, and everything runs smoothly because Fargus has the money and influence to control both inmates and guards. That night, the fight is set. Kirkman goes from cell to cell collecting money from those who want to watch, almost like selling tickets to a show. Inside the arena, Danny steps into the ring with his opponent. Fargus oversees everything, acting as both judge and referee. The rules are simple. The fight only ends when he says so, or when one of them dies. The match begins, and it is immediately brutal. At first, Danny struggles. His opponent keeps targeting the injury on his stomach, pushing him into a corner. But Danny's endurance and fighting skills quickly take over. He adapts, fights back, and eventually defeats his opponent with ease. As a reward, he is given a single cigarette. It seems small, but it raises questions. Danny starts wondering how Fargus is able to maintain this entire operation. Irving later explains that the money comes from these fights, but that is only part of it. Fargus also controls a massive drug network, even from inside the prison. Hearing this, Danny is shocked. He immediately shares everything with Gwen and begins to connect the dots. It becomes clear to him that Fargus is most likely the one who set him up. After all, Fargus used to be the head of a major criminal organization before Danny put him behind bars. With his connections still active on the outside, setting up a trap like this would not be difficult at all. Because of his suspicions, Danny asks Gwen to dig deeper and track every transaction connected to Fargus. He is convinced that Fargus has been laundering money from his drug operation, and it needs to be exposed before Danny ends up dead inside the prison. Meanwhile, the underground fights continue nonstop. The situation starts to get out of control, and Burke becomes increasingly uneasy about what is happening under his watch. He calls in Fargus and demands that everything be shut down, but Fargus does not even consider stopping. Instead, he turns the pressure back on Burke by threatening his family, leaving him with no choice but to stay silent. At the same time, Danny and Irving take a moment to observe a heavily built inmate named Axel. He is one of Fargus's top fighters, known for being nearly unstoppable. As they watch, Axel easily takes down two members of the Black Gang who try to attack him. Danny is impressed by how quickly Axel defeats his opponents. Irving explains that Axel does not rely on brute strength alone. He uses his opponent's movements against them, turning their attacks into deadly counterstrikes. Realizing that Irving has deep knowledge of combat techniques, Danny asks him to become his trainer so he can survive the fights ahead. Not long after, Kirkman shows up and informs Danny that he will be facing a strong opponent in just a few days. Knowing he still has some time to prepare, Danny asks for permission to train with Irving. After some persistence, Kirkman finally agrees to let Irving guide his training. From that point on, Danny trains every day with Irving, learning new techniques and improving his fighting skills. He also spends time studying Axel and other fighters, carefully observing their styles and strategies. The more he watches, the more determined he becomes to grow stronger. As they spend more time together, Irving slowly begins to open up. He eventually reveals that he has been planning an escape. About 10 years ago, he discovered a hidden hole in one of the prison rooms. Over time, he has secretly expanded it, keeping it hidden all these years. Later, as they prepare to rest, Danny asks about Irving's life before prison, especially his training gym. Irving shares that he originally planned to pass the gym on to his daughter, Elisa, who would now be around Danny's age. But after he was imprisoned, the gym was likely taken away. Even so, he still holds on to one hope, to one day leave this place and reunite with his daughter and his grandchild in the city. The time finally comes for the next fight. Kirkman escorts Danny into the arena, where Fargus is already watching closely. This time, Danny has no trouble handling his opponent. He fights with confidence and takes him down without much difficulty. Because of that victory, Fargus grants Danny's request to step away from the arena, at least for now. At the same time, Irving sees his chance. With the guards distracted, he makes his move and tries to escape through the hidden tunnel he has been working on for years. But the plan does not go as expected. Kirkman somehow discovers it, chases him down, and shoots him on the spot. From a distance, Danny sees everything happen. He is filled with anger and frustration, but there is nothing he can do. All he can do is watch as his only ally is taken from him. Later, back in his cell, Danny finds a note left behind by Irving. In it, Irving asks one final favor. If Danny ever makes it out, he wants him to visit his old gym and take care of his daughter and grandchild as a way of repaying everything he did for him inside the prison. Meanwhile, Gwen has gathered enough evidence to prove that Fargus is still running his criminal network and that he was behind the setup that put Danny in prison. She brings everything to her superiors so the case can be pushed forward. Back inside the prison, Danny continues training on his own, preparing for whatever comes next. Not long after, Fargus approaches him. That night, Danny will face the prison's strongest fighter, Axel. Knowing what is coming, Danny quickly reaches out to Gwen. The news shocks her, especially since she is already working to get him out. Without wasting time, she contacts the police chief and heads straight to Blackwater. When she arrives, Gwen confronts Burke and presses him about Danny and the illegal fights happening inside the prison. The situation catches Burke off guard, and instead of answering, he orders his guards to detain her. Back in the arena, the final fight begins. Danny faces Axel in a brutal match, and from the start, he struggles against Axel's overwhelming strength. It feels like he is being pushed to his limit. In the middle of the fight, everything starts to fall apart. Burke receives word that the police have arrived at the prison. Panic sets in, and he tries to make a run for it. But before he can escape, Gwen steps in and takes him down. At the same time, Danny manages to turn the fight around. He pushes through the pain and finally brings Axel down, leaving him unable to continue. But the chaos is far from over. The inmates, already on edge, begin to riot. The barriers collapse, and the situation spirals out of control. Seeing this, Fargus decides to flee, abandoning Kirkman, who is quickly overwhelmed by the raging prisoners. Danny spots Fargus trying to escape and immediately goes after him. The chase leads to a direct confrontation, but before it can end, Axel steps back in and stands in Danny's way once again. While Danny is still locked in a brutal fight with Axel, who continues protecting Fargus, something unexpected happens. The Black Gang, led by Rollins, suddenly steps in. Instead of attacking Danny, they turn on Fargus, blocking his escape and beating him down until he is finally killed. With Fargus gone, Danny focuses everything on finishing the fight. After a long and exhausting struggle, he finally overcomes Axel. Completely drained, Danny is approached by Gwen, who has now taken control of the prison with the help of the police. But before things can settle, the police chief suddenly steps in and shoots Axel without hesitation, ending the fight for good. After surviving everything, Danny keeps his promise to Irving. He visits the old training gym that once meant so much to his friend. At first, the place seems empty, with nothing of value left behind, but something feels off. When Danny hits one of the punching bags, it feels different. Curious, he tears it open and discovers stacks of hidden cash inside, thousands of dollars that Irving had secretly saved. With that money, Danny tracks down Irving's daughter, Elisa, and hands everything over to her, fulfilling his final wish. In the end, Danny leaves that chapter of his life behind and moves forward, finally finding peace as he begins a new life with Gwen. So the moral of the story is if your coworker invites you to an easy job, your boss suddenly raids your house, and a prison kingpin offers you a Fight Club membership, just say no and go open a gym instead.